I grew up with it. I mean, I grew up in a small town on the south coast of England called Weymouth in Dorset, and the nearest Football League club was 25 miles away, which is Bournemouth.
Right.
And then quite a few people went to Southampton, which is 50 miles away, and then going the other direction, the nearest one is Exeter, which is 50 miles away. So we were a footballing backwater. And Weymouth seemed, my dad took me, and it seemed the sort of, they seemed a big club to me when I was a small boy. And indeed, when I was 10, 11, we won the Southern League twice in the days when it was a great thing, great league, big clubs in it. But you used to get big players that were dropped out of the pro leagues. I can remember John Charles coming to play there for Merthyr Tydfil. We were managed at that time by Franco Farrell.
Wow.
Who went on to manage Torquay, then Manchester United.
Your involvement with Weymouth, as you say, long, varied, fan to chairman. Which did you prefer, being a fan or a chairman?
Well, I tell you this, when you become chairman of a club, your attitude to football changes forever. You can never go back to being a fan. It's just not that simple anymore. I liked the naivety of being a fan. I liked not knowing what went on in the boardroom and what the finances of the thing were. I loved the lack of responsibility for it all, and demanding that the board spend more money on players without knowing what the finances of their club were, like every fan. And I just wanted to go and watch them play football. We had wonderful times through the 70s and 80s. We had players like Steve Claridge, Andy Townsend, Graham Roberts, Sean Till. We had great footballers there at that club that went on to be big players. We were a big club in non-league football. They're one of the top 10 in the country in those days, in the early days of the conference and before automatic promotion. When they were in trouble and they were, going through Southern League and even the regional division of the Southern League back in the, in the early 90s and then into the 2000s, and they were in the doldrums and nothing was happening. And I had a lot of contacts, and I thought I'll offer to go back to go into the club. And of course, I wrote a book about it called Floodlit Dreams, and with an ironic subtitle of How to Save a Football Club. And it just coloured my perception. It changed everything really, of people, the internal politics of a small town club, of finances, of how none of it adds up, and you're just desperately trying to make your hometown a decent club. But it was hard work, and somebody came in with a lot of money, and to cut a long story short, the club went bust. He put a lot of money in over the next 2 years, lost a lot of money, drove him nuts. He asked me to come back.
Yeah, well, name the gentleman, and the money.
Well, his name was Martin Harrison, and the first season we did really well. I thought we were going to win the Southern League and go up into the conference. It was in the days when before Conference North and Conference South. So I thought we were going to go up into the conference, but after Christmas we didn't have the money to compete with Crawley, who won the league and went on to be. To go up into the Football League eventually. We went the other way. We finished runners-up, but we had doubled Gates to 1,500. Steve Claridge had been fantastic for us.
As player-manager?
As player-manager, scored 30 goals as well as getting some great players to the club. And we became attractive to the point where a local hotelier, although he was a Londoner, a local hotelier said, I want to take over the club.
Right.
Everyone bit his hands off because he was wealthy and wanted to throw. Right. The next 2 years he put £3 million into it. He paid outrageous sums of money for players that were coming to the end of their career. Huge wage bill. They did really well. Got into the conference after 2 seasons. Won Conference South. Got into the conference. Were third at Christmas in the conference. But then he ran out of money and he pulled the plug. And the club, that is 10 years ago, the club has been suffering ever since through a series of owners that couldn't make it pay, questionable decisions, questionable people here and there, and it's just sort of finding its feet again in the Southern League. But I couldn't work with the guy. I mean, the guy was a law unto himself. He wanted to do certain things. It did for him, unfortunately, in the end, Martin Harrison. I mean, he and I had terrible, terrible battles. Some of them very public. at AGMs and so on. But I came to feel sympathetic towards him, to the point where he rang me up and said, I'm having a nervous breakdown. I can't handle this club anymore. I'll give you it for £1, and I'll give you £100,000 to put into the club. And I looked at the finances of it. It was losing money hand over fist. And in the end, I said no. And that's when all the very different people took it over, and it just wasn't going to work. But Martin died about 3 years ago, and I'm convinced that that whole experience had a very detrimental effect on his health. And I was asked to go into my local club, St Albans City, as chairman, which I did for 18 months, but then resigned because the two owners, that to be fair to them, were putting in money. Yeah. They were losing a lot of money, suddenly decided they wanted to put the admission prices up halfway through a season. And I said, I'd never known that at a football club before. But they insisted on putting it through the board, and I said, look, I can't implement this as your chairman. I think this is not going to go down well with fans, we'll do it at the end of the season. But they did it, and so I said, look, I'm sorry, I'm going to go. I was phoned up by Steve Claridge saying, look, I was appointed manager at Salisbury. The club has gone bust, but we're going to try and start it again.
Salisbury?
Yeah, Salisbury in Wiltshire, with a group of local businessmen. Will you come and help? And I went down, and I agreed to get involved with a consortium of 5 people. So I'm now vice chairman at Salisbury. And we had to start from scratch. We had to get the club off the administrators. We had to get it into a league. We got into the Wessex League, which is the 9th division of English football, step 5 in the national pyramid system. And we had to get the stadium back off the trustees, and they let us back in it. We're doing well. We're top of the Wessex League. We're hoping to have a good run in the FA Vars.
And I see you on Twitter defend Steve Claridge against his critics.
I love Steve. He's my he's my best mate in football. Always has been. There's an old adage, that when you're in football you want to be out of it, and when you're out of it you want to be in it, and it gets under your skin. There's a lot of very. I saw a documentary recently of the Manchester United boys that bought Salford City, and I saw Paul Scholes with his head in his hands going, why the F did we buy a football club? Yeah. And I retweeted it and I said, welcome to my world, Paul. We have one employee at Salisbury. Yeah. The rest of it is volunteers. We're all volunteers.
But Steve's good at his job. Why?
Steve is one of the most underrated characters. When Steve was a footballer, and he played for so many people, he was viewed as this bit of a knockabout character. I wrote his first autobiography, his first volume, and he did another one as well, which was him trying to be sensible in his second one. But in his first one, he freely admitted to gambling problems. People saw him out on the field. A lot of managers bought him though. He was a kind of poor man's Kenny Dalglish. He could hold the ball up really well and score goals, without obviously the highest ability that Kenny Dalglish had. But he was talented, Steve, more than people thought. He was a deceptive as a player. And a lot of managers wanted him for that very reason. He had great spells at Leicester, scored a Worthington Cup final winner at Hillsborough in a replay. He scored the goal that got them into the Premier League. He had 2 bad spells in his whole career, one at Luton and one at Wolves. Apart from that, everywhere he went, he gave 100%. People loved him. But they underestimate how shrewd he is. They underestimate how smart he is. They thought he was a bit of a knockabout character. Now, I appointed him manager at Weymouth, and I tell you, he's incredibly professional. He was unlucky at Millwall. He fell victim to some internal politics. Same with Milan Mandaric at Portsmouth. He should have been given the job full time, and it set him back in his managerial career. And at Salisbury, all he wanted to do was prove that he could be a good manager, no matter the level. People think because we're a big club at the level we pay fortunes, which we don't. There are clubs paying more than us at that level. But he's found players from nowhere, he's made them better, he's taken us to the top of the league. He's got a great eye for a player and how to blend a football team. And I'm going to defend him to the hill. I like him as a pundit as well. I think he's honest.
Is it possible in this day and age for a club like Salisbury, like Weymouth, a non-league club, to make it to the promised land?
To how far?
Well,
do you
League
mean?
Two. League Two.
Yeah, it is. It is. It takes more money than ever because the conference, due to promotion and relegation, has changed an awful lot. For those of us in non-league, the conference is pretty much like the Premier League for football league clubs. It's where you aspire to and just want to get and stay there. It's feasible, but like a club wanting to get into the Premier League, it's going to take money. You've got to speculate to accumulate. Now, having gone bust at the old club Salisbury City, we're now Salisbury FC, we're never going to do that. We're never going to throw sums of money at it. Our wage bill is 33% of our income, which is a smart figure. Mm-hmm. So we don't go loopy. But eventually you are going to have to make a decision. Can you raise enough through the gate?
Yeah.
We're getting gates of 600 and 700 at our level, which is
paying
really
how much
good.
to get in? How much is it to get in?
£8,
right.
Which is probably £1 more than the other next highest in the league because we've got great facilities. I mean, would you believe we've got 6 executive boxes at Salisbury?
Right. Well, tell me about facilities, because I do hear from football fans, well, not just my generation, our generation, but younger ones as well, that now they prefer going to watch a non-league game.
There are a lot. Yeah, I mean, we had £8.50 for our Vars tie the other day, and we'll go through the 1,000 mark. The reason we were only at £8.50 that day was because Southampton were at home. A lot of people go from Salisbury to Southampton, so.
Can I get a great pie?
You can get.
Is the match programme exorbitant? Can I afford one?
It's £2 for a programme. It's £8 to get in. Most at our level, it's £1 for a programme and £5 or £6 to get in.
Right.
But because of our facilities and because of the upkeep of our stadium, our fans are happy to pay that. We can.
Do you do that old-fashioned thing of kick off at 3 o'clock on a Saturday?
We do. Yeah,
my word.
Yeah, it's a weird feeling sometimes to kick off 3 on a Saturday when there's only about 2 Premier League games going on at the time. But yeah, a lot of people, like that experience. You can park your car, you can drive up, you can park your car at 2:45.
Right.
You've got a 50-yard walk. Even if we've got a big game, you can still get in the car park. You can sit in comfort. You can get a pie and a pint. You can sit up in the bar. You can't, and afterwards the players will come up and you can talk to them, and the whole experience is a lot more manageable for people. Mm-hmm. You can move around the ground, for goodness sake. Mm-hmm. You can change ends at half time. It's a more civilised experience in many ways, really. I can never, whenever I go, I mean, I was privileged as a football writer. You were always in press boxes, great seats. You always got fed well, particularly in the modern Premier League era. And you're in afterwards around the players and the managers' press conferences and that. When I used to take my son to Tottenham and we'd sit in the gods, whatever, I felt very divorced from the attitude, from the atmosphere and the game, and that's the average fan experience, really. I find it quite an antiseptic experience. At non-league level, it's quite raw at times. Sometimes you can get embroiled in arguments that you shouldn't do as a director, but because you're so close to fans and so close to the atmosphere. So
that's something for all Leyton Orient fans, including the one on camera, to look forward to then.
Yeah, no, I think Orient will be fine as long as the Italian doesn't go crazy over the next couple of years.
Thank you very much for your time, sir.
You're welcome.